Sweet. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming in and hopping into the event tonight. Before we start off, I do want to have a land acknowledgement done by Ashley Morales. Ashley, if you could take it away.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Before we get started, as common practice at Cal Poly Pomona, before beginning any community event, we'd like to acknowledge that we are currently occupying at Cal Poly Pomona the native lands of the Tongva and the Kiv Nations. To find out whose land you currently occupy, you can text your zip code at 907-312-5085, or you can visit nativeland.ca for more information.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Ashley. Hello, everybody. My name is James. I am the incoming president of CPP NOMAS for the 2021-2022 school year. Following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a group of students came together to form CPP NOMAS. CPP NOMAS is driven by our three core beliefs: to inspire youth, to elevate opportunities, and to share a common voice. Our mission is to establish a solid foundation for raising social awareness and giving back to the community with our fellow architecture students. Now with over 100 members, CPP NOMAS is continuing its fight against racial discrimination and injustice in order to reconfigure the profession as a whole. Tonight, we are joined by SmithGroup in our first ever NOMAS talk to present Society's Cage, the Shape of Institutional Racism. Society's Cage is an interpretive installation that is a recreation of injustices called by systematic racism and white supremacy, emerging after the murders of George Floyd and Pavilion, sculpted to symbolize the historic forces of racialized state violence. I would now like to introduce SmithGroup's very own Britton Washington.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I am a principal at the SmithGroup LA office, LA San Diego office, and we're very happy to participate in this in our partnership with CPP NOMAS. So SmithGroup has a national approach to our internship program, and that is for the national assist the local offices with their partnering and recruiting from the various educational institutions in our community and throughout the nation. Last year in the LA office, we hosted one of your own students, Corey Norman. Corey was one of 4 students who interned with SmithGroup Los Angeles for the summer of 2020. Through that association, we are now partnering with CP NOMAS chapter. Later this year, we at SmithGroup will be in partnership with NOMAS, and we'll announce various new student-focused programs that we're putting together, which will focus on the introducing first and second year students to the practice of architecture. Our goal is to provide physical and online resources for the classroom and departments. So stay tuned for updates, and we'll be working with you and giving you information. So with that in mind, I'd like to now talk about why we are here today, as was said by James, and what we will be presenting to you. From our cultural studio in our Washington, D.C. office, I have the pleasure to introduce 2 influential thought leaders. First, I want to talk about Dayton Schroeder. Dayton is a principal at AIA and NOMA member and is a design principal who has championed design justice advocacy throughout his career at SmithGroup. As a leader of the firm's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, his charge is to lead design projects that address the systematic injustice that architecture and planning have perpetuated for historically disenfranchised communities of color. Leveraging his tenacious passion for design justice with authenticity and creativity, he is currently leading anti-racism efforts in the design projects, including the National Slavery Museum, located in Lumpkin Slave Jail Site, Devil's Half Acre in Richmond, Virginia, and a traveling installation of Society's Cage. That sheds the nation's awareness on the intersectional effects of racism in our society, collectively, health, safety, and welfare. Dayton is co-author of the research grant called Hidden Voices for the development of a rubric of architects and planners doing a community engagement around Black historic sites of trauma and resilience in the United States. Also presenting with Dayton is Julian Arrington. He's an associate and is lead designer in SmithGroup, Washington, D.C.'s cultural studio, as I mentioned, with Dayton. A proud graduate of Howard University, Julian has shaped concepts for multiple museum projects, including a museum to address the history of slavery in Richmond, Virginia, and the University Hip Hop Museum, and the Museum of Pop Culture, and some others. As a co-designer for the Society's Cage, Julian choreographed the project from concept to built installation to traveling exhibit, and has presented the work to the design profession and students at universities and architectural school programs across the United States. A proponent of the community-informed design, Julian has helped lead stakeholder engagement efforts to craft designs that reflect the goals and aspirations of people they serve. He takes pride in his Puerto Rican and African-American roots and seeks to leverage his diverse upbringing to assist others in fostering the strong foundations that connect to identity. I am also involved with our justice, equity, and diversity level within SmithGroup. So I'm very proud to introduce these two gentlemen, and I look forward to hearing their presentation, and I really look forward to your afterwards following the questions and answers, because that's where we get to understand what's on your mind. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to them.
Thanks, Bretton. That was a great introduction, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the presentation here. Just give me a couple seconds. And again, my name is, as Bretton said, Dayton Schroeder. I'm an architect with the Smith Group based out of the DC office. So it's 9:15 for us here. It's probably a little bit earlier for you guys, but you know, we never sleep. So this is good. But you know, today we're going to talk a little bit about Society's Cage. But you know, before we get into Society's Cage, I figured it would be also, because you are students, and I'm not sure how familiar some of you are with Smith Group, figured we'd give you a brief overview of our firm and the work we do, because we are primarily architects. You know, we've been getting a lot of traction and play and exposure through Society's Cage, and people tend to forget that we are primarily architects. So we'll talk a little bit about that and then jump into Society's Cage in a bit. Can you all see, Julian, can you see the screen? Awesome. All right, so we are the oldest AE firm in the country. We have 15 offices nationwide, including one in Shanghai, China. So we're widely distributed. Oop, wrong thing. We are a diverse practice with studios, you know, focused on commercial work. We do office, residential, hotels. We do healthcare. We do science and tech, higher education. We have a government studio, and of course, we have a cultural studio that focuses on our cultural work as well. And we have a dedicated interiors group that sort of complements each of those disciplines as well. We're an integrated practice, so we're more than just architects. You know, we specialize in architecture, interiors, urban planning, campus planning. You know, all facets of engineering, including, you know, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, civil, structural. You know, we do it all. We even do lab planning, urban planning, etc. Our local practice, consists of a workplace studio that's responsible for a lot of the commercial work that we do. Office buildings, multifamily, residential condos, and that's sort of where I've been generally. I'm sort of based out of, but I'm somewhat of an octopus in that I have hands in a little bit of everything. We also place a lot of emphasis on thought leadership. So, we have experts that kind of focus on, sustainability, education, forensic science. We have exhibit designers in-house. We're growing the practice to now incorporate, design justice. So design justice expertise is also a thing that's sort of emerging out of this design leadership and thought leadership. And we also wanted to give you a flavor of our personal work. If you invite us back one day, we can talk, with more specificity about some of these projects. But figured we kind of just show you some of the actual architecture that we're doing in addition to Society's Cage. So the project that you see on the screen is the DC Water headquarters. This is a 150,000 square foot new administrative headquarter building for DC Water, which is our local water utility company. It's a great example of innovation. Features one of the first commercial application of a sewage heat recovery system that's used to heat and cool the building, and is now, one of the most sustainable buildings in the country. We just went LEED Platinum on this maybe a month ago. The Levin building, this is probably my favorite building that I've designed. This is a neural and behavioral science building at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a great example of placemaking with this this south-facing metal scrim that had a sort of a biophilic influence, and was designed to help mitigate and mitigate sun and be a sun. On the boards, we have the National Slavery Museum at Lumpkin's Slave Jail / Devil's Half Acre in Richmond, Virginia. So this will be a new 100,000 square foot museum built around the archaeological remains of the Lumpkin's Slave Jail. Robert Lumpkins ran one of the most notorious slave auction sites in the country, and so we have managed to secure the site and do this new interpretive project to interpret the historic remains of that slave jail. And then on the boards as well, we have the Universal Hip Hop Museum. This will be a 50,000 square foot space. It will be mostly interior fit out of interpretive space to celebrate the history and culture of hip hop. So the museum, you see this, there's sort of towers up above, and at the plinth, at the base of those towers is this plinth. And essentially within that plinth will be the museum, which will essentially occupy a portion of the ground floor and the entire second floor of that building. We're currently on hold for fundraising, but we're hoping to start this up sometime in the near future. The base building is actually under construction. We ran into some delays because of COVID, where things were kind of shut down. So things are just starting to gear up again and move forward. So be on the lookout for that as it evolves and turns into something exciting. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Julian to say a few things about this slide.
Yeah, we like to include this slide in our presentation to kind of give note or nod to the legacy of historically Black colleges and universities. So 3 of the individuals on the team, Dayton, myself, and Montiel Crawley all attended HBCUs. So we love to kind of include that within the context of our presentation, because it speaks to authenticity in some regards. So Howard University, which is where I went, and Dayton went to Tuskegee, and Montiel went to Hampton.
And you notice that Tuskegee is first, it's on the left. So it's like, I'm just playing. So with that, we'll shift over to the reason we're here today. We'll talk a little bit about society's cage. You know, I guess I'll start by giving you a little bit of the origin story and the background and genesis on how this project got started. This was a very much a grassroots effort, you know, born in the aftermath of the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd murders. You know, we wanted to do something to contextualize these murders and contribute to the discussions that were happening in broader society and within our industry around institutional racism and white supremacy and its legacy. You know, so often as a society, we've been conditioned to see these murders largely as anomalies, and the police who commit these murders by extension as bad apples. And you know, so we wanted to essentially take a nominal approach and contextualize these murders within the 400-year history of racialized state violence in America. And you know, we established very early on that we wanted to avoid cliches. You know, we wanted to avoid that feel-good monument and nostalgic moment where everyone sort of gathers around and pats each other on the back and congratulates each other for just being great people. You know, we wanted to really kind of seize upon this opportunity in this moment really, to provide a teachable opportunity and inspire and mobilize people into taking action. So we got started in this process early in June, shortly after George Floyd's death. And in less than 3 months of time, you know, we had to conceive of a concept. We became our own client because we weren't hired to do this. We had to secure a physical site. We had to fabricate the installation. We had to build a fundraising platform because we didn't have a financial structure to fundraise money. We had to build a website and the experience. So we'll touch on a little bit of that as we go through the presentation. This was a process-driven design. I like to say that you know, the resulting aesthetic was driven by data, and the data was driven by questions. And the first question that we asked is, you know, what is the value of Black life? You know, what societal structures have impacted Black life? You know, what are their historic patterns? You know, how have they evolved over time and changed? You know, what are the racial and gender discrepancies inherent in those patterns? And that ultimately, those questions, I should say, ultimately led us to the institutions of lynching, mass incarceration, capital punishment, and police killings. So in essence, society's cage became a physical response to a series of questions that we asked. And with that, I'll turn it over to Julian at this point to talk a little bit more about the concept and how it evolved.
So what you have before you is a series of essentially concept or morphology diagrams. So it's talking about where we started from and how we sort of ended up where we ended up. So it's all about kind of representing this idea of equity through this perfect cube. So a cube is this sort of idealistic picture of what society could be if it was fair and equitable and just. And then we're taking the data that Dayton depicted on the previous slide, the lynching, the capital punishment, civilian killings by police, and then forgot the other one also. And then mass incarceration or police brutality. And what's happening is they're converging and they're triangulating above your head to create this void. And the void represents the data that sort of physically impedes upon your path, but also sort of gives you this impression of oppression. So it's all about kind of creating this emotive experience through the use of facts and data. So the way that we depicted the cube was through a series of bars. So there's 484 rods that are essentially, spaced 8 inches apart. And within the cube, some of them actually physically sort of hang a few inches above the surface or the base surface of the pavilion, while the rest of them are kind of used to articulate the data. And that one in 4 of those rods that hovers above the ground is essentially intended to depict this idea that 1 in 4 Black Americans are expected to be incarcerated within their lives. And that's how we ended up with Society's Cage in the pavilion. So it's really about creating this legible experience and juxtaposing it against this pure form with raw data. So we love to show the renderings, even though it's a real thing, because one, the renderings, you'll find that the renderings kind of resemble the end product, or vice versa. The end product resembles the renderings, and the way the renderings are depicted are kind of descriptive in essence of what we wanted the experience to be. So the experience is all about creating a moment of color and really giving the user the opportunity to see the context in a new, meaningful way. So what we did here is we created both an educational and an emotive experience. So the exterior of the pavilion is all about telling a story and really creating a framework for the experience. So it's giving users the data, it's giving users a synopsis, and we even went as far as to give actual sort of examples of different forms of state violence. So stories like the Mary Turner story, for example, and we went raw, we went full on with all this information because it's real. We want people to know the facts. So the interior is all about creating this space. It's about creating a place, creating a sense of solace, a moment of reflection, and an opportunity for people to, like I said, see the context, and whether it's the immediate context or the larger context, in a new and meaningful way. And part of the experience is sort of this, as I said, not only the triangulation of the data, but it's also about the lighting. It's about the sound component, as Dayton alluded to, and it's about layers of information. So if you look down on the ground, what's happening is we actually listed out the names. There's 10,000 different victims that we listed out of different forms of state violence. And we listed their name, when they died, and how they died. And basically what's happening is, as you walk through the experience, we listed out quotes of luminaires to kind of lead you through this experience, to kind of give the sense of the few that kind of were able to succeed in spite of these obvious obstacles. And then sort of lighting that experience is these 50 lights in commemoration of not only the 50 states, but also this idea of finding refuge. And if you think about the North Star, for example, how slaves had to find refuge through the forest, it's about this sort of constellation effect. So the musical component is actually 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Initially, we thought it was going to be almost like this simple chime, this like a ring or something. But another member of the team, Ivan O'Garrow, he had I think it was his nephew that he knew, and we reached out to them in New Orleans, and they created a 8 minute and 46 second soundscape. And over the course of that 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you could begin to hear these transitions. And each one of the movements within the piece are intended to kind of give this idea of the different forms of state violence.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. You know, the exterior edifice of the pavilion is really designed in many ways to be emotional trigger for visitors. You know, we wanted an experience that the visitors would kind of move around in a succinct way, but be triggered in a very intentional and direct way. We didn't have a whole lot of real estate because this is a very small pavilion, so we were very careful about curating it in such a way where we had very pointed facts. You know, so we'd have a takeaway statement and then a brief synopsis of each form of state violence, and then a personal account of how a single individual was impacted by each form of state violence. And the idea is that once the visitor went through that experience, we invited them to the interior of the edifice, and we encouraged everyone to take part in a breathing exercise where they would hold their breath for as long as they could, in reference to the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that George Floyd suffered at the hands of police. And then they would pull out their phones and record a short video stating how long they were able to hold their breath, and also provide a few, reflective statements on how they felt in that moment, and then upload those videos or even a statement to social media using the hashtag Society's Cage. And the idea behind that was for the experience to almost transcend the experience. You know, we wanted to provide an opportunity where we would empower the visitor to in turn have difficult conversations with friends and family, and reach people in a way that we cannot do. But it was through this mechanism of creating awareness around racialized state violence, and then providing this edifice, this tool as a means of magnifying the message and allowing people to then have these conversations with close friends and families. It would permeate beyond this experience. So that was also a part of it, and really a fundamental part of the emotive and participatory experience, which is largely about building empathy. Then moving on to the build, as I mentioned, this installation was a grassroots effort. We just, before we had funding for a site, so it was designed as being non-site specific. And at one point in time, when we were talking about the concept, we were even considering like just going to Home Depot or Lowe's to source materials, and maybe just ask the firm for a couple $1,000s, maybe crowdsource labor from the office staff and maybe some other interested parties. We also even at one point talked about doing the pipes like with PVC pipe. It was all over the place, because we were just thinking about, in a very crude manner, like how we were going to make this happen. And word got out through the process, went up the food chain, so to speak, and SmithGroup's board of directors got wind of what we were doing. They were super excited about it and the potential of what the project was. And they helped underwrite some of the seed funding to make a professional installation possible. So, we were able to kind of get this thing professionally fabricated, and also got some support in building our website, and also some personal support in helping establish some relationships with some 501c3s that had the financial structure that was needed to fundraise and raise money for this initiative. We had and I'm just talking over these slides. We had approached the mayor of Washington, D.C. I'm sure you all have seen Black Lives Matter Plaza, which I rode by today in terror and saw that all the yellow letters were gone. Everything's been repaved. but I was reassured that they're gonna have it up and running again, repainted by the end of the week. So anyway, side note, stream of conscious side note, just came to mind. But anyway, the Mayor Bowser's administration was extremely supportive of what we were doing. You know, we reached out to them. They loved what we were doing, but their hands were essentially tied because the city was put on hold due to COVID. You know, all public permits were put on hold, and there was nothing that they could really do. But they did suggest that we reach out to the National Park Service, which didn't have such restrictions because it's under national and federal jurisdiction. So we did approach the National Park Service. They offered 3 sites to us, one of which was this site on the National Mall, right at the intersection of 12th Street and on axes with the as you'll see in just a few minutes, the National Monument and the Capitol building. So it was this was like a no-brainer. And you know, I think, you know, there was also, this site was also reserved for another group, which coincidentally had pulled out because of concerns over COVID. And so it was just luck that we were able to kind of get this site and move in and fill the void. These are just some random photos of the build on the mall. That's Eric Groening, who is the fabricator and installer, who graciously kind of came on board and lended his support. And you kind of see the guys kind of welding things on site. 99% of the installation was steel. It's a combination of welded and bolted steel members that was like literally built up right on site here. Nothing was prefabricated. Everything was like literally brought to the site in pieces and erected in the manner of a couple days. This is actually a photo on the left of Julian putting the last rod in the hole, and I'm like on the ladder trying to take the picture above. And you see the sort of extended team, the broader team to the right in that photo. You actually see the ladder still kind of leaning on the side of the installation. So we're just, you know, we're just gearing up. And well, yeah, that's all I'll say for now. I'll let Julian speak to the installation itself.
So as Dayton noted earlier, the first sighting of Society's Cage was on the National Mall. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the National Mall, it's kind of where all the Smithsonian's are staged. It's where the what do you call it, Washington Monument is, as you see in the photo, and the Capitol as well. So the nation's front lawn because of its prominence. So this being the first site, it kind of set out for us aspirations that as we continue to do installs, to really place the pavilion in sites of power, to really provide a vessel for people to begin to see the context in new and meaningful ways. So we almost regard the pavilion as a lens of sorts. So even in this image, the power of this image is more about the context. As you can see, the pavilion was rather small compared to its context, but as you'll see in the following photos, the experience is more at the user scale. But you can see the African American Museum, so there's a relationship there. There's the Washington Monument, and then as we know in recent months, the Capitol. So there was some significance following that. So this is probably one of our favorite photos to use. It does a really good job of kind of highlighting the data. You could kind of, it's easy to not only perceive the cubic form, but also you could see how the data through the pavilion begins to get articulated. And then in the background, the Capitol. So you're getting the layers of information. And then also you could kind of get a sense of how popular the pavilion became. This is also a photo that we love, despite the lack of people in it. It does a really good job of kind of telling the story of the pavilion in its second mode, because the pavilion really has these two modes. So it's about essentially it becomes like a sanctuary at night where people could come, you know, get a moment of solace, get a moment to themselves to be introspective and really think about the state of things. And then in the day, as you saw previously, it's all about kind of the pavilion as an object, as a sculpture. So it's more of a representation of the data that's creating the pavilion. And Dayton, I didn't know if you wanted to sum it up your way. I know you like to talk about the masculinity versus the feminine.
No, you know, this slide to me, this represents the culmination of the data. So as Julian had described earlier, you know, what you're seeing here really is the shape of racism, institutionalized racism. We inscribed each of the facades with data through you know, linear line graphs that essentially describe how African Americans or Black Americans have been impacted by the institutions of lynching, mass incarceration, capital punishment, and lynching. And in inscribing that data on each of the facades, that data is then in turn, you know, triangulated, combined, and you know, sort of mathematically averaged across the form of the pavilion, resulting in this shape, you know, and so that shape is literally a mathematical expression of 400 years of systemic racialized state violence, anti-Black state violence. So when you enter the edifice, you are literally standing underneath the symbolic weight of racism and white supremacy. But yeah, I don't know. And yeah, that's always, I guess that's what I see when I see it. Do you want to set this up? I guess I guess I could kind of speak to this a little bit. You know, we you know, late in that first installation, I think it was like days before we were, first of all, we were on the mall, as I said, the National Mall. We wanted to be at Black Lives Matter Plaza. We weren't able to be there because, you know, the city was not able to, you know, do any public permits, which was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I think we would have been preaching to the choir if we did go to Black Lives Matter. And the thing I like about the National Mall is it afforded us a more broad and diverse audience, and it allowed us to kind of get outside of the comfort zone of the audience that we would have normally been accustomed to speaking to, and reach a broader, you know, a broader spectrum, a lens of people, regardless of their ideological orientation, regardless of, you know, their race, their age, etc. So we kind of were able to kind of get access to everyone. And interestingly enough, we also, I think I may have failed to mention earlier in the presentation, one of the things that came on our radar as we were working through this process and designing the installation was the 2020 March on Washington, which was set to be in August 28th of last year. And we were literally a month away, and we still hadn't secured a site. We hadn't started fabrication, and we're sweating bullets because we didn't know if this thing was going to be a reality. And we, you know, the site fortunately came available just in the nick of time. We were able to kind of start the process of getting this thing fabricated. And once we got it on the site, there was literally the day of the 2020 March on Washington, there was literally paint still drying on this thing, like literally, you know. And it was also coincidentally the tail end of the RNC convention for the 2020 re-election of Trump that was happening like literally 2 blocks away. And so we were able, there were a lot of folks that were in town for that convention. that also were attracted to the site naturally being the National Mall. So we're able to attract even that element. But late in the stage of us being on the National Mall, it occurred to us that there was an opportunity here to invite artists to this space. So we entertained the idea of inviting social justice focused artists into this space, and we experimented with interpretive dance, spoken word, poetry, and music inside the space. So on the left is Yari Delankar, and to the right is Lawrence, spoken word artist, based out of DC, Howard University grad. But Yari specifically, we invited her into the space and commissioned her to perform an interpretive dance within the space, with the 8-minute and 46-second soundscape that we commissioned for the space. So I want to just show you a snippet of Yari Delancar's performance. She's a trained Alvin Ailey dancer, and she essentially through her dance interpreted the not only the 8-minute and 46-second soundscape, which is a rendition of George Floyd's death, but the soundscape itself is composed in 4 parts, each of which is themed around each of the 4 institutions of racialized state violence. So in her interpretive dance, she's actually also interpreting, these forms of racialized state violence. So hopefully that kind of sets the mood and the tone. And I'll just show you a snippet if I can get this to load up, and hopefully the sound plays as well. interest of time, but if you are interested, actually you could go to YouTube and you can find this readily, easily. Just basically search for Yari Delancourt Society's Cage, and it should come up, and you can watch it in its entirety. And one of the things that was very interesting about the installation, if you notice, there are a lot of nuances to this that you don't really pick up in the photographs, but hopefully in the video you kind of notice that the bars themselves are dynamic, and that they pick up on some of the subtle breezes that flow through the site, and occasionally they'll even hit one another. They'll tang, and so you get this sound of metal sort of clanging, hitting metal hitting metal, and it it really kind of created an unanticipated but very powerful added layer of nuance when you combine the soundscape and you hear the twanging metal, metal hitting metal. It just made for a really powerful experience. And as Julian was mentioning, there are two modes. I think by day, the pavilion essentially functions as a sculpture, and I like to say it has a very masculine energy, and the focus is very external, and I think by nighttime, it's sort of the space, as you can kind of see, sort of inverts, and it kind of takes on this very powerful female energy, and the focus becomes more internal, and the spatial qualities inside the space are really akin almost to like a forest or the woods, and we like to say that the idea behind that is that we see the woods and the forest as historically being a place of safe passage and refuge for escaped slaves, but also a space of deep trauma, as these were also spaces where the enslaved were hunted, sometimes captured, and even lynched. So some of those nuances are sort of evoked through the architecture and just the tectonics and architectural language that was kind of used for the space. Julian, am I missing anything?
No, I think that sums up. I think this image does a better job of kind of telling that story than the Allen one.
That's actually Julian, by the way. And then, this is a traveling installation. As I mentioned, it was not designed to be site specific. So the next site that we brought the installation to was the War Memorial Plaza in Baltimore, Maryland. So this was a shot that was taken with Julian on the right, myself in the center, and the mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott. And this was back in October for Architecture Month, and the site was situated between City Hall and the War Memorial Building, and so it was another very powerful site. And that's just us again, giving the tour. And we plan to, we have plans to travel the installation to every major city for sake of just reaching a critical mass of people. So we have a traveling plan in place to go to New York, Chicago, hopefully LA if you'll have us, San Francisco, New Orleans, and Miami even. But we also would like to go to sites of conscience, like Tulsa and Richmond. So we're actually packing up the installation at the end of next week, and we're actually headed down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, for the centennial events around the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre there. And then hopefully through our connections in Richmond, we'll be able to loop around, travel the country, and maybe by late next year, we're able to bring the installation to Richmond, Virginia, which is also, if you've been watching everything that's been transpiring in that city around the removal of the monuments on Monument Avenue. It's a city that's in need of some deep reconciliation and dialogue around you know, you know, around remediation and racial reconciliation. So we're hoping to bring this there and hopefully be a voice in that conversation as well. This is just another site. You could actually, just another photo. You can actually see kind of the layers and the texture of the rusted pipes. It was also interesting in that wherever we brought the installation, people would place flowers, you know, on the installation. People kind of saw this as sacred space and a place, you know, kind of worthy of giving reverence. We've had people who would walk up to the installation and before they ventured inside, they would like remove their shoes, you know, because they almost saw the space as a sanctum and as a sacred space, and they didn't want to be disrespectful or violate the sanctum and purity of the space. So it's very interesting in that regard. And what I like to say is, this installation really marries well with sites of power. We like to put this installation in the context of historically significant buildings, monuments or structures, related to law, democracy, law enforcement, justice. We also would like to put this in context of, African-American sites of trauma and resilience. We think of the Pavilion as a lens for reframing our view of established historical structures. And it gives us the ability to view those structures within the context of the history of racialized state violence.
Dave, I was gonna say, just to give reference, I'm not sure if you did already, but just to give reference to where it is in Baltimore. I know we always seem to forget to put the aerial, and we had some drone shots.
Yeah, I thought that was in it.
The previous photo, the one that kind of shows the texture in the background is Baltimore. That's City Hall, and then in the photo, Dayton was just talking about that was that the War Memorial?
That's the War Memorial building, and then just to the right of that is the Central Police Headquarters for the city of Baltimore. So we're, so essentially we've placed this installation sort of again within the nucleus and centrality of these symbolic structures. And I'm a big fan of like the Howard Zinn approach to history of people's history. And for me, and this what Society's Cage really does is it allows the visitors to see things from the perspective of the oppressed, right? It's a people's history. It's a way of seeing these symbols and these structures through the lens of racialized state violence. And then just a couple shots. You want to speak to this, Julian?
No, I mean it's kind of a still depiction of the hovering and the clanking and the dynamism that Dayton was speaking about in the I'm about to say animation, in the short video, and then in the foreground is a statistic, one of those three, the tripartite that you saw in the initial rendering that kind of breaks down on the what we call the apron. This is a statistic. I believe it's mass incarceration.
Yeah.
But
and as we travel the installation, we see each locale as being unique, and because we did this installation on the National Mall, there was a sort of a general focus at telling the sort of national story of racialized state violence. But as we travel to each locale and municipality, we see it as an opportunity to augment and customize some of the interpretive language to kind of really speak to some of the local and unique stories inherent in each city that we visit. So we could get a little bit more specific, and also allow our stakeholders and our hosts to kind of weigh in on the stories that need to be told. This is just another photo. It's also worth mentioning, you know, this was part of a fundraising campaign, you know, where we partnered with the Architectural Foundation's Diversity Advancement Scholarship Fund, I believe it was called. And so we, you know, not only were we committed to the idea of raising awareness and educating the public in an interpretive way, but there was also a desire to also have some direct action, and also, you know, raising money for education, for scholarships, for you know, for students, you know, young architecture students. So, and you know, I like to always kind of say, you know, in closing, that we took the ugliness of racism and we tried to render it in a beautiful way to draw people in, to have you know, uncomfortable but necessary conversations about race and racial reconciliation. And I think there is a little time-lapse video in here, which I'll try to show you guys. Oh, sorry, Julian, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was gonna say, usually like to mention how our photos are kind of a, you know, it's what do you call it? It's almost like a depository of all the these different perspectives of our staff, of our colleagues, and other visitors that ventured to the site. So it's a collage in essence, and it kind of tells a story, as Dayton was alluding to, about a lens, and it's giving the perspective of different users. And even in some of our submissions to different entities, we've kind of maintained the same level of variety, even though we did have a professional photographer that donated his time in kind. We still like to sort of, like the previous photo was actually a colleague of ours, and we use it all the time. We love how it kind of depicts, it's so like a beautiful artistic shot that kind of depicts the data really well in contrast with the Capitol. But you could tell through the presentation there was a variety of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, typically, you know, when you have a professional project, paid project, there's a photography budget. You get a photographer, comes on, and he takes a set of professional photos. And we didn't have the liberty to do that here because it was a, you know, grassroots effort, as I mentioned. So in many ways, as Julian said, it's just, I kind of cringed at it initially because there were so many different types of styles of photographs, and there was no consistency to the language. But over the time, I've grown to appreciate the diversity of the imagery, because as Julian mentioned, it is a representation and a reflection in many ways of the diversity of lenses and groups of people who have seen this. So in a way, it's kind of beautiful to kind of just see, you know, the lack of consistency and the different styles and renditions of the installation. And there's things that, quite frankly, there's shots that I would have never anticipated taking, like this one. You know, if you know, I never would have, you know, taken this shot of my own or commissioned a photographer to take it. It was something that, you know, someone in our firm, kind of a moment that they thought was special, and they discovered, and they took advantage of it, and it resulted in this beautiful shot. So
I was gonna say, it's a sunrise, right?
Yeah, I think he happened to be there overnight.
Yeah.
And that was another part of the installation that we didn't really speak to, but we part of our agreement with the National Park Service was for us to be on site 24/7. It means 24 hours a day for the full duration of the time we were there, which ended up being a little bit over 2 weeks on the National Mall, by the way. And so we didn't have a budget for security. So we crowdsourced a lot of volunteers, mostly from our local office, to in many cases stay overnight. Julian and myself on a couple occasions stayed overnight. And on this occasion, the gentleman who took this photograph stayed overnight. And so he was there literally when the sun was rising, and was able to kind of take this beautiful shot. And I'll just let this time lapse go through. Speaking of staying overnight, this is another stayed overnight shot. I think that concludes the formal presentation, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think that's it. Open it up for Q&A.
I just want to say thank you so much, Dayton and Julian. I feel like I can speak for everyone here by saying that Society's Cage is necessary and very powerful. Like you guys said earlier about the masculine and feminine aspects of the project, by day, it's this monolith of knowledge and information. And by night, I mean, I don't know if anybody else felt it, but just seeing the photos of it lit up was so chilling and so emotional to see that. I guess I'm going to kick off the Q&A, but I guess my question is, was that something really intentional that you guys had the viewing of it at night versus the viewing of it at day, or was it sort of a happenstance that just really worked out?
I would say that the lighting is integral to the design. So that was part of our artistic vision. We didn't necessarily, I don't think we came to the realization or the assumption that it would end up being masculine versus feminine, but we definitely kind of thought about the nighttime being something special.
Yeah, and I know we even thought about, we were concerned about potential light pollution from some of the, when we were scouting sites, you know, that was one of the factors that we looked for. We looked for a site that wasn't immersed in artificial light, because I actually was concerned with the output of those lights that we chose. They were just like, you know, really low voltage, you know, plug and play LED lights. And I didn't think they were going to be as powerful as they were. So I was concerned in making sure that the light, you know, didn't have any encroaching light that would draw away from the power of what they were going to output. But they actually ended up putting out a lot more power than we had anticipated. And as you said, you know, created this incredible, interior environment that just sort of came alive as a sanctum at night. And I don't think it was that calculated. I mean, there's things you do as a designer intuitively that you hope are going to be impactful and you know, kind of create the mood. But I think the final thing in reality is always you know, has a degree of surprise, unless you completely nerd out and just go full, you know, 3D Studio Max and really kind of dial in and simulate everything, you know, in a way that's, you know, hyper realistic. But we didn't go that far for this one.
Awesome, thank you.
I can go next on the questions, by the way. Hello, my name is Corey Norman, by the way. I'm the publicist for CPP NOMA. And actually, I think I would first, like I said, like James said, I really want to thank you guys for coming by with this, because this presentation was absolutely beautiful, man. Like it's definitely one of my favorite pieces, man. And I was really excited about this coming through, and I really appreciate you guys showing us this. And you know, it's very inspiring to me because like my question just basically leads up to you know, how did you guys get into such, how can I say it, such a necessary, you know, part of architecture? Like, how did you get into this? Because like, and like basically, let me explain a little better. It's like, well, in school, you know, we're taught to like that architecture can be somewhat kind of contradicting in a way, because we, you know, you get in a lot of discussions about how, you know, we can't help homelessness because, you know, of how our position at work, you know, like we kind of just do what our bosses tell us to do. Like, hey, we need to design a school, or we need to design a mall, or we need to design a house or something like that. But we design it in places where it causes gentrification and other situational problems. But we just pretty much just take the job, take the contract. I'm here, I'm clocking in today, I'm doing my drawings, it's getting built, designed, we're moving on to the next contract. But to actually be a part of something that's so significant and necessary as of this, like the condition of the mind and the spirit, racism and systematic oppression, you know, something else that's also a big problem within our country, within our world, you know, and using architecture at that to actually address it and create awareness towards that. That to me is inspiring, because it's like, you know, we're not just these people that draw buildings and design buildings and build them. We actually do hold a hand out in architecture and in the world and create differences and changes. And we're able to do that. We have that power, you know, to do that. And just being able to be in a predicament, in a position as you guys are, to implement that and actually see that. It's not like a whole straight firm thing, but you guys are actually designing these things from this, you know, helping design these things from the Society's Cage to the Slave Museum, even the hip hop museum in Bronx, which is the birth of hip hop. You know what I'm saying? With DJ Cool, like I'm all about that. Like I know all about that. So that's really dope and very, very, very inspiring to see. And you know, and one more thing before we crack off on the question too, like you said that it's not site specific, but I feel like it is. No matter where you put that thing, it's always site specific. It's no matter where. You could put it on a mountain, and I'm telling people will flock to that. I don't seen it. They do it all the time. You know, Mount Everest, they climb these mountains just to get to the top. And ain't nothing up there. There's nothing up there. But you know, so anything that educates, you know, educates like this does and connects with the spirit, no matter where. You can put it in the middle of the street. You can put it wherever you want to put it. People will come to this. People will be inspired by this. People will flock to this, and it does what it's supposed to do. It engages with everyone around it. It engages with an environment. It even engages with time, as you can see with the time lapse, and the time of day and night. It engages with everything. It's such a holistic, monolithic thing of architecture, a beautiful piece of architecture. And I really appreciate you guys for showing us this and having a hand in this. But how do you, yeah, how do you guys like get in that position to be able to, like, I don't know if I'm saying the right word, but you know, contribute to creating something so important and not just any other building or any other thing, you know? How's that?
I'll start that one, Julian. I mean, I think Corey, you have to learn to be your true and authentic self. And you know, a lot of this work, a lot of this passion, a lot of the things that I talked about today, a lot of things that we put into this project were things that have been manifest long before we had the opportunity to actually deliver on any of this. You know, these are, reading about, racialized state violence, you know, the institution of lynching, mass incarceration. These are things that we've been talking about long before 2020. These were things I was passionate about as a student. you know,
Yes.
and you know, put a lot of emotional energy into. And I think the universe has a way of responding and pulling things to you that you give mental energy to. And, you know, in this particular instance, in this particular project, you know, we didn't really want to, because I think it's always a mistake with students where, you know, you kind of start with precedents and conceptual, you know, conceptual sketches, and you start to, the thing starts to manifest before you even had a chance to really understand what needs to manifest. And for this, we really had to step back and ask ourselves a series of questions. As I said, you know, what is the value of Black life? What are the societal structures that have impacted Black life? And literally be vulnerable enough in our process to allow the artistic and architectural statement to respond in an authentic and linear way, and also to be vulnerable enough and trust and allowing for that process to naturally happen. Because, you know, a lot of architecture right now, and it's probably always been the case, a lot of architecture is lost in fashion, you know, the fashion, whatever the fashion of the day is. And you see architects getting great opportunities to design things, and they squander the opportunity by chasing whatever is fashionable and cool in the moment, as opposed to taking the opportunity to really dig deep and figure out, you know, what is the right solution. Exactly. You know, every site is unique, you know, every space is unique and affords its own unique imprint of a building. I don't think you can design the same building on two different sites. You know, it doesn't make any sense, right? Every site affords its own unique considerations and thoughts about what should materialize. In this case, I mean, I'm mixing metaphors here because this is a non-specific installation. But my point is that you have to take the opportunity to really kind of figure out what needs to be delivered, what's important, and what's the messaging, and be vulnerable enough to deliver on that message, and find a way to balance it to make it look. I'm not saying that it shouldn't look good, because you have to. It should also look good too. But that's part of your skill as an artist and an architect, to mitigate and balance the two. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, I just echo. I can echo that, and I'll try to be succinct and quick, I should say. What is it called? Authenticity, like you said, Dayton. Passion. So to me, Dayton kind of, it's funny because when he said those words, it kind of exemplifies what I think. Like, kind of, if you wanted to talk about who Dayton is, I feel like those kind of words are like how I would describe him. So I feel like this project, to me, I consider myself a very passionate person. So kind of in spite of the fact, like the things that you mentioned when you talk about like client-based work and things of the sort, and as Dayton described earlier in the presentation, that the process was kind of the derivative of our own sort of grassroots initiative. So we took it upon ourselves because we had a passion about this topic. So we really, you know, this was extracurricular. Like these weren't billable hours. So we were still, as you said, clocking in and clocking out. Yeah. But then after that, we spent another 8.5, 9 hours working on this because it was, like you said, it was important work. Yes. And we felt like it had to get done. And we kind of identified that, you know, it's a necessary thing. You know, there's not a lot of tangible things that speak to this rhetoric and this realm of work. And I think that we just felt like it was necessary. So it was like, it was coffee. The passion is like coffee. It's like, okay, you know, it keeps you awake. It keeps you driving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were literally, Julian is being humble, but like there are literally times when we were up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning communicating on this, not knowing if this was really going to happen because there was so many moving pieces and unknowns. We didn't have, like I said, we didn't have a site. We didn't have money. You know, there were some of the fabricators that we were reaching out to build this thing were giving us quotes for $300,000. And I could tell you, we didn't spend $300,000 to build this. And I didn't even think that was even, morally viable. You know what I mean? Like that we weren't even,
I get what you mean.
Doesn't even make sense. There were plenty of moments throughout this process that cast a lot of doubt on whether or not we could really pull it off. And in spite of all that, I will say, you know, this team was up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on many occasions, in spite of all the challenges, just marching forward and making it happen.
Okay, thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's good feedback, man. That's great feedback. Definitely inspiring. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm graduating right now, and I plan on just getting out to this field and starting my career. But I definitely want to get my hand in on considerate architecture like this, and have experience in this. This is definitely my passion. Appreciate you guys.
Send us a resume, man.
Yeah.
Man, look here, Brandon. Let them know, Brandon.
Go on. We on the West Coast. I got dibs.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
So we have a question from the chat by Andrew. How do people stay overnight at the site? In a tent or something similar?
Yeah, we had a tent positioned on the site, and it also we also had a generator and a few other things that kind of sat under the tent, and people were able to you actually have to stay awake overnight. You couldn't sleep there. You know, you had to be on alert and basically provide surveillance 24/7. It's part of our permit agreement.
Yeah, a lot of good friends and company and conversation, good music. You know, to keep it going. It got tough around 4:30. But you know, it's like that's when you crack the jokes and you know, just try to. One night though, I blacked out. I'm not gonna lie. I think I blacked out, man. Julian was up. I was out, man. I think I might have coasted off for at least an hour, sometime around 4. And you know, and then when the sun comes up, though, that helps. It gives you like something about the sun gives you some energy. But no, it was. I mean, we're just under. I mean, luckily it was late summer. You know, and typically late summers in DC are very kind of humid, but at nighttime everything sort of cools off. So you know, it was nice, and we lucked up. Most of the time period were clear skies. I mean, there were a few rainy nights, and then one of the first groups who stayed overnight was actually a woman on our team who brought her family, and her husband and her family stayed overnight, and the kids were actually camped out on the lawn in their tents. And what we didn't realize was that there was irrigation in the lawn, and so the irrigation went off at like 4:30 a.m. or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the kids got soaked in their tents. So that kind of like killed their night. So we everyone learned from that point on not to stay away from the lawn, you know, at 5 a.m. in the morning, because the you know. And then we had a couple, I won't say scary moments, but you get some interesting characters that roll through in DC at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. So you know, you don't want to doze off too long anyway. You want to be alert.
Great, thank you. I think we have one more question. If anybody wants to unmute and ask away.
I have a question for Dayton and Julian. First off, thank you for taking time out of your day to talk about Society's Cage. It's very interesting to see all like the thoughts and processes that went into articulating this beautiful installation. I have a question about the materiality. You've mentioned how the vertical elements were welded, molded metal, and erected on site. And Breton mentioned how in a chat how this metal bars symbolize something. I was just wondering if there were any significance on the other materials like the floor and the ceiling chosen throughout the whole project.
You want to speak to that?
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
You can speak. I was just gonna say you spoke about the conduit, right? The electrical conduit and
Probably
how
not.
that.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So the pipes, the rusted pipes are actually electrical conduit. So we wanted to get a material that was sort of readily available and had some sustainable qualities in terms of being recyclable and things of the sort. And they're all artificially rusted to give the effect, as you see in the photographs. The rest of the installation is steel. And I think, it's mostly about the rods that are depicting the data. But the reason why we did go with the steel structure had to do with integrity. And I think, there's a legacy that's in alignment with the steel industry and what we're trying to depict here. There's a lot of history in terms of port cities and how those cities sort of are positioned in locations that were kind of symbolic of port cities for slavery as well. So I mean, we didn't really get into the nuances of that, but I think steel was really like the place we ended up because of its integrity. And we kind of identified that we wanted to do something that was kind of a kit of parts of sorts, so something that could be easily deconstructed and reconstructed for installation. And all those sort of elements were in alignment.
Yeah, it was economical at the end of the day. I think, given the scale and the size of what we wanted to create to really have impact, the most economical way to do it was built up steel. The pipes themselves were in addition to the reasons that Julian just gave, they were electrical conduit because we had hoped to maybe source material from industry partners, in the building industry. So we were hoping, maybe there'd be an electrical subcontractor who our message resonated with, who might be willing to donate, some in-kind material. We also had to choose a material that was capable of, conveying the linear bar graphs that you see early on in the presentation. We were also doing this installation in the middle of the first wave of COVID quarantines. So there was a lot of sensitivity around preserving an open air environment, keeping things open. And some of the earlier concepts that we had explored, we had looked at some built up planes that formed like topography and some other things, and they essentially formed these walls, and they just weren't, those solutions just weren't conducive to creating a COVID friendly environment. So the steel rods they served a multitude of purposes, and I think was a good and they're also cheap and readily available. So they served a lot of really practical purposes in addition to conveying the concept.
Thank you.
Yeah, everything. I mean, 99% of this installation was steel. And I mean, it's, if we could, and we had even tried initially to even use a larger gauge steel pipe and use the steel pipes themselves as the structure, but it wasn't feasible economically for the budget we had, and then the time that we had to do this. We had to make concessions, and so that's there's a superstructure built of steel and then the rusted rods are more or less inserted within that superstructure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So before we end this event, I do want to pass this over to the Vice President of SoCal NOMA, Alitris Harris. Alitris, if you'd like to speak up and say a little something.
Am I muted? Yeah, there
No,
I
we're
am.
good. We're good now.
Hello, guys. How are you doing? This has been amazing. Though I was triple duty, I was like trying to get in and listen to as much as I could. It just sounds so amazing. I can't wait to really dive into all that was presented tonight. But I did want to take an opportunity to thank Cal Poly NOMAS and the members, the founding members, and all of those that are keeping everything going. I know that you guys have just had your new officers, and you're going to be, on a new path. A lot of your founding members are fifth-year seniors, and they have passed the gavel. So great luck. Looking forward to working with you guys. Also want to thank SmithGroup. I mean, you guys sound amazing. I want to know more. We want to get you a lot more involved with all of the chapters, and just, hear about your work, experience it, internships, all of those things, and just fold you into the SoCal NOMA family. We have not had that kind of contact with this Smith group. I know some of our other chapters have. And so we're looking forward to that. And thank you so much for the work that you have been doing this semester with Cal Poly Pomona, and just propelling them to the next level. They are our signature chapter right now, just doing some amazing things. And I just want to encourage them to continue that. And we are here for whatever you guys need. Thank you so much.
Thank you.